projector have to scroll?
Yeah, there should be projectors and scrolls there.
Can you remove it? What's that music? This is sound.
There would be a projector control.
Okay, it's a blue screen. At least it's not that distracting. We can just leave it there.
There's got to be a way to focus this on thing. He says, knowing that there may not.
There's no way to do anything.
Hang on a sec. Yeah, unless you can focus, it's lost cause anyway.
Alright, well, I would let's just forget about that. Okay, we're going to start right now on time, right? Sorry. Start on time. Only 13 people registered for this event, so all the rest of you are not registered, you can walk out. But anyway, this session, what we're going to talk about is basically the eBook, the pros and the cons, the eReaders, and how can you use it in a law school classroom. And so today, I am Don Joe from William Mitchell College of Law. I'm the Assistant Director of Library and Educational Technology. And I'm going to, I don't think, Alma doesn't need any, what's that?
I didn't want to have blue facing.
Yeah, which is,
Hopefully it doesn't turn off the camera. Or maybe it does.
Well, the PC is not
well,
working.
looks like it does.
There we go.
We have some problems with the computer.
There you go.
So we're not going to have
No, I'm
any
sure it's still running.
real display. We have some problem with the computer. But anyway, I don't think Alma needs any introduction, so I'm just pass it along.
Oh, to me? Well, I wasn't planning on starting.
No, I'm
to introduce myself?
Introduce.
Oh, okay. I'll introduce myself. I'm Elmer Masters. I'm the Director of Internet Development with CALI. I guess I'll have a little bit to say on this panel about what CALI is thinking about ebooks and some of the projects we're working on.
I'm Jonathan Ezor. I'm Assistant Professor of Law and Technology at Touro on Long Island and the Director of our Institute for Business Law and Technology. And my focus is primarily as a tech-friendly and user classroom professor and talking about what I see as the pluses and minuses of integrating ebooks into the curriculum.
My name is David Dickens. I work at Pepperdine University School of Law. I'm the consulting technologist and system architect there. I wanted to be able to participate in this because we're actually doing a pilot this summer with this particular piece of equipment, and we've already learned a few lessons, and we hope to learn a few more, and so hopefully we can share a little bit of that as we go along.
Good. With that said, does anybody have any questions you want to start with before we can? I mean, this is a panel discussion. Anybody have any question to ask right now? If not, we can start with
Well, I have a question.
Okay.
But I don't know if you're going to get to this. But one reason, I wasn't one of the 13 people that signed up. So, but I was reading it. What struck me is, this ongoing conflict that people have about, and faculty have about how much technology should be used in the classroom. How many people are paying attention? Or are they looking at their email or playing games while they're multitasking? And so my question is, how's that attitude dovetail, if at all, with the increase of ebooks coming into curriculum from law school all the way down? Because, in other words,
I'm happy
to make myself clear. It's like, how do you?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
It's that classic debate. Laptops in the classroom. It's probably just about as popular as student printing as a topic, right? Well, as a general matter, I've heard from the people who want nothing. There was a great story from the AALS a few years ago. Some of you may have been in the room. Probably all of you were in the room. Of a professor who decided she was going to try an experiment and ban laptops and only allow students to take notes on a Post-it. A self-adhesive, removable piece of paper. on the idea that people take notes, they're transcribing, they're not thinking. Then she said, but she didn't realize that they make poster-sized Post-its. Someone, of course. I've also heard people who say that when they were in law school in the caveman days, they did crossword puzzles. And it's really up to the faculty member to engage the students. If your students are going to find distractions, then maybe you ought to teach better. Needless to say, that doesn't always go over so well, particularly for the people who should hear it. My answer in my classroom generally with technology is what I tell my students. Because I teach internet law, sometimes I want them to be online. And I also know sometimes they're just going to zone out, but they're adults. So what I ask them to do is not to distract the person behind them. If they're going to be looking at something, look at something that is not visually arresting. So that if you're looking at Facebook, fine, but if it's this big and it's not your friends, you really couldn't care less. You recognize from the colors it's Facebook. It's tough. I think where it comes into eBooks is what devices you're using. Are you going to mandate a reader that can work offline? Or is the text in question going to be something that's only online? Well, if it's only online, or if it's some sort of collaborative thing, then you have to be online, and then they've got access to everything else. But also, how are you using it? Are you using it in a way, as with everything else, that's going to engage and encourage discussion? Or are you using it in a way that's going to allow them to look like they're reading something when they're doing something else? It's all about utilization. And that's why with all these things, with eBooks, think about how this particular text fits into the class, how this version of the text fits into the class, and what you're going to do with it during the class so that you get at some of those issues. I hope that's helpful.
Mark, okay, go ahead. You have a question. Okay, well, she asked it first. Yeah.
I'll see to the more elderly states.
Okay. Get Ken's question.
The only one I have experience with so far is the Kindle, the DX in particular. And the thing that I see is shortcoming in a classroom, especially a law classroom environment, is the inability to annotate on it.
David. Funny you should say that.
Right.
Is the note or
coordinate
any of
the
the other
cameras?
ones,
Yeah.
anything short of the iPad allow that yet?
Yeah. Well, that's the question. We're back to David. I think we have a very good program. David is actually right now experimenting with the use of the e-reader. And my take to Mark's question is that education is all about delivering, how you deliver your education. You know, you do it Socratic way, face-to-face, that's fine. The professors were perfectly okay without any technology, walking into the classroom, teaching the way. That's perfectly okay. But, you know, the education is not just one way. That's not the only way to deliver your education. Right, so, I mean, e-reader, the people who are here, or the people who, like us, would like those new tech toys to enhance teaching, I mean, that should be encouraged in a way. It's a different way of delivering education.
Could just throw in one more thing before he starts picks up on Ken's point. There was an article in the last week or two I read, and I can't remember if it was the New York Times or some technology journal about, I don't believe law students, it was college students and high school students. And the survey actually was counterintuitive to what people thought. They actually preferred not having the e-books because of what you just said and the ability to highlight and to flip back and forth in class. And they found it much more cumbersome to use the electronic tools, even though they were all into the electronic tools for Facebook and everything else and social media, but to actually sit in a classroom and flip back and forth and highlight and annotate.
I think that was
what was that in?
That was specifically the Kindle, though. They hadn't looked at.
Okay.
Yeah, because of the technology is slow flipping pages. You can't just sort of skim through.
Yeah, right. It was
You can
clear
do
enough, but
other unnamed products.
Well, she
let's
has a
get-
question before we move on to David.
My question is, can you just give us an overview of where the technology is now and where it's going to go? Because it seems to be changing at a pretty fast clip. And then the second question is, what the legal community, and I guess I'm not so much talking about education, but the professional consumers, practice books or the how-to stuff that people consume, lawyers consume, not loose treatises. If that's being picked up by ABA or any of the other publishers. So I'm kind of asking you to give us a survey of where we are and where you see us going in the next 5 years.
Alan, do you want to pick up the first question? We compare a lot of the e-reader.
Yeah, about with the things with, yeah, the annotation stuff. I know David's got some cool stuff to show off, but yeah, I mean I've looked at a number of the hardware-based things, and like Ken said, that the biggest drawback to a lot of this stuff has been annotation. The Kindle, the thing with the Kindle is great for reading novels. It's really kind of great for sort of that leisurely reading. If it's something that if it's something that you need to mark up, if it's something that has a lot of pictures, like cookbooks, for example, you think, well, it'd be cool, it'd be kind of on the Kindle. Nope, doesn't work so good on the Kindle. I mean, the Kindle's kind of limited in that scope, and then the annotation tools are fairly primitive. The cool thing that the Kindle does have going for it, though, is pretty amazing cross-platform support, right? I can open a book on my Kindle and stop, and then I can open the same book on my Mac, and it'll pick up where I left off on my Kindle, and then I can close that, and I can open it up on my iPod, and it'll pick up where I left off on the Mac, and I can stop reading on the iPad and pick it up on my Windows computer, and it'll pick up where I left off on the iPad, and I can stop on my Windows computer, and I can open it up on my BlackBerry, and read it a little bit there, and that all goes around. So that's great. The sort of the flip side of that is the Apple's iBooks, which does do really nice annotations. You can do highlighting, you can do all kinds of great stuff, but yeah, you can do notes, you can do a lot of cool stuff, but it's trapped on the device. It doesn't go anywhere. So if I don't have, so when this falls off a shelf and shatters, which this is my second one, I was out of luck, right? It was backed up on my Mac, so I had the data, I couldn't see it. Well, yes, I could have, yes, but there's a big difference between, well, actually, no, that's not entirely true, because iPad-only apps won't open properly on the iPhone.
The new iBook app.
Yeah, the new iBook, yeah, but that's, on OS 4, right.
Yeah.
Right, and that's
slow.
not out yet, and it's slow, and there's, and you're going to run into, it's not the best sort of thing.
Alma, just wait, he has a question.
I don't have a Kindle, but I really do love the Kindle software on the iPad and the iPhone, because you can go back and forth. But one interesting feature that I think would be very useful in an academic setting is when people highlight on the iPad or the iPhone, you can see it does a different little underline, so that you know that other people have highlighted that text there, both in the table of contents as well as text. So in terms of a classroom setting, it would be wonderful to, it's just like you're reading an old book that someone's annotated or highlighted before, to slow down at that part, because 3 or more people have highlighted that text.
Right.
I think just before this panel started, John, you said something about, or David, you said something about the paper version of the textbook where students buy a new book. Can you want to talk about along the same line?
Yeah, sure. And then I can go back and talk about a couple other device things that people were talking about. But first, I think that there is a certain group of students that prefer a book that's already been marked up. They deliberately go and seek out a used book because they want what someone may have marked in the book before. And that's an aspect of the whole problem of that will also get eventually brought up here, the resale or the return sale, as it were, back to your bookstore. A lot of students depend upon that to reduce the price of the money they're outlaying for the books in the first place. And if they're buying ebooks, particularly ones that are pretty cranked down in terms of DRM, they're not going to be able to do that. They're not going to be able to make any sort of resale. So if the decrease in production cost on the publisher side doesn't enter into the consumer space, the consumers are really getting a much more limited product, in the sense that they can't sell it back, but also they don't have that resource to draw from in the second generation sale. You know, for those who want it. Now, not everyone does, but the ones that do have been able to take advantage of that, and suddenly they won't be able to anymore if, you know, your book, once you're done, disappears. In the case of this particular piece of technology, there's a number of like device-specific questions and device-centric things with regard to how this behaves in the classroom. Like everything from, is it a distraction like a laptop? I know some people turn off the wireless in their building. A lot of these things are 3G, and they do their own thing on the cellular network, and you're not going to disrupt that. So, you know, you have to be aware that the technology may go in certain ways that your security is not in place to prevent. But on the other hand, there is good that can come with that too. This thing can work offline just fine, and all of them can. Oh, this particular unit put out by a company called Entourage. They're an innovative startup. It's called the Edge, and it's a first-generation device, but it's a good one. It's basically an integrated Android netbook, touchscreen-based netbook on one screen, and the e-ink reader on the other. I don't want to do like a sales presentation here, but I want to point out the specific things we're talking about here. Annotation is really why is the thrust of their sales pitch. That what they're trying to do is go after the educational market and say, here you can develop your EPUB, PDF, whatever materials, and get them into your students' hands through our library system, our sales system, or just deliver it to them electronically. And then when they're going along in your classroom, they can make notes right on the material. They can highlight it, they can type in large blocks of text, and it takes those annotations and includes them in the table of contents and all those items in your permanent library here. Now, unlike what you were talking about in losing the iPad stuff, these things can be integrated in with the actual document. So someone could pass on, assuming the DRM is not in place to prevent, you know, that sort of thing, but someone could pass on a marked up version of the document on to someone else. You can save the document together with all your annotations. And the annotations are multimedia enabled because this is a full Android style netbook. You can access web pages and videos and sound clips. You can do recordings. If the professor allowed recordings in class and you wanted to do, instead of trying to record the entire class, you just wanted to record certain snippets that were terribly important at certain points in the lecture, you can do that, and all that annotation is kept together with the document and accessible within the system. I think that alleviates some of the barriers of making ebooks pedagogically useful, at least from the student point of view. We've got a professor I'm working with this summer. I was concerned because I didn't know what we were getting ourselves into completely, and I didn't want to overburden him. I wanted to do as much as I could for him. But when I stopped in his office to do a little consult on exactly what we were working with here in terms of materials, you know, he showed me the stack of papers he's got for his class. They fill an entire shelf. You know, and so from his point of view, getting this into something like this is a pretty reasonable exchange. Now, with him, we're not working with publishing problems. It's all content that he owns or has rights to. But one of the first things we ran into with our enthusiastic startup company was when they tried to contact your favorite publishers out there. I don't know if any of your favorite publishers are watching on the video. Hi. They were completely unprepared for the idea that someone. Now, I've worked with these people before. We had a blind student a couple of years back, and I've gone and gotten, you know, text for them to be able to use with JAWS and stuff like that. But they were completely unprepared to talk about the licensing and distribution of electronic books. I mean, stunned, unprepared. And the ones that seemed interested in it, they themselves admitted that they hadn't talked to the professors who had been the authors of the material in the first place to get permission. So while they may have been, while the publisher may have even had some level of enthusiasm, there was no preparation on their part in terms of the license they had gotten. And so we were going to have to go, in many instances, directly to the author of the book and find out, in sort of this gray area, how we were going to make this work. And of course, we have Full It on campus, and they have an exclusive right to sell. Is this a different storefront? Because this is a storefront, essentially, for provided by Entourage. I don't know. These are important questions. So that's kind of my string of things here with regard to what could be done, at least with what the technology that's available now.
If I could just add to that, if that's all right. The issue of whether your bookstore has the right to make course packets is something we do need to look at from a contractual perspective. It's true of online, but maybe if something isn't alive online, I mean, a lot of times you can get around some of the licensing issues by simply giving students a URL and say, go read it online. Then you're not making copies. But if you're just, that's what, right? But is this making copies? Here's another fun thing for you. And this, by the way, also can be true for some of the online courses that were discussed in the panel in this room this morning. Many of you might have heard of what happened last year with Amazon and George Orwell's 1984. Amazon was selling 1984 in its Kindle bookstore as a digital book and discovered at some point that it didn't have the rights to do it. It thought it had, but the publisher... Amazon sent a delete command to every Kindle, and the book disappeared, and it credited the customers. But we've all, I think, those of us who teach or those of us who've dealt with legal publications, have dealt with 2nd edition, 3rd edition, 12th edition of the casebook, right? Keep in mind that any online reader or any online connected reader will have every ability for a publisher to go delete the 2nd editions when the 3rd edition comes out. Just make it go away. Now, from a currency perspective, that might be great. But whether your student is looking to study because there's still really valid stuff in that book, maybe it's bar-related material, maybe it's practice-related material, or for that matter, your student has taken an online course, goes back to study, and it turns out the course is no longer available. And all the discussions and all the materials are no longer online. The one thing, or the students drop it and it isn't well backed up. These are not permanent. They're not even nearly as permanent as paper. And in thinking about utilization, we have to think about the disposition after the fact and what that does economically. It was the point that we were discussing earlier of the students who resell the books. If you're spending $150 for both, but you can get $40 back on the used market for the print one, are we then asking our students to spend more money for the ebook? Yes. Is that what we want? Setting aside the hardware requirement. Books themselves have a certain usage, and maybe we're getting past that. But we have to think about what happens with those materials, other than gathering dust, in figuring out the best way to implement this. And just one more thing of how I've used ebooks in my courses.
Jonathan, before we move on,
Please.
can I it's a good transition point. Answer the second question. What kind of law materials, related materials, are right now in the ebook format? And maybe that's
not much. I mean, pretty much. The thing about it is, ebooks are as old. I mean, in a sense, as a PDF. I mean, you can whatever you can now find out there is in PDF is technically an ebook, and you can technically use it. And there's wonderful resources provided by all sorts of people in this room and elsewhere. But apart from the things that are already available web-wise that you might be able to capture and use that are provided by other people, there's not much, because they just weren't prepared, and they're still not prepared to do it. This was driven by, this innovation was driven by Amazon realizing that they could make a lot of money by angling a different direction than people expected. And it didn't come from the academic side. And none of the academic publishers are ready for it.
Well,
it's a novel thing.
They're moving. West and Lexis and some of the others are beginning to, primarily with their big subject matter basic case books, are putting out, they're not ebook versions per se. Many times they're essentially many of them are web related. They are outlined. You can search through them. They're finding new ways of essentially producing them as interactive documents. but it's early on, probably as new volumes come out, if they can work out the rights with ever more sophisticated writers, that there will be more books like that. Some lend themselves more to that. You can certainly imagine that a West or a Lexis or some of the other folks who may be doing this, instead of simply the edited version or only the edited version of the case, which usually leaves out the really important parts, in the case book it can link to the entire text. But we also want to think a little more creatively. Some of you may have heard recently that C-SPAN has put its entire video archive in a searchable online database. Anyone ever hear about legislative history? Right? Forget about looking up the congressional record. It occurred to me in thinking about this panel, because the laws I teach about in internet law are new enough that many of them, those hearings will have been televised. And so when I'm talking about, Communications Decency Act and say, Congress wanted, here, click on this link, let's see Congressperson X or Senator X say it in the original. That's an e-book. That is where this is going. And some of what we have to do is figure out these sort of different resources.
And,
Okay,
and
good.
it's,
Yeah, good.
well, actually, I was just going to say, while you were talking, Jonathan, I did a quick search. And you can get a number of nutshells, for example, in the Kindle store for the Kindle. I didn't, because like casebook titles, who can ever search for casebook titles? Good Lord. But I know I can do a search for law nutshell and find some stuff. So yeah, so at least West is looking at some of this stuff. And I know that they actually do have some casebooks are starting to turn up on the Kindle. One of the interesting things, of course, is what the price points are, which are not that much lower than the print versions.
Right.
But like I said, no resale, and that probably is an issue. Now, I don't know if there's anything available in the iBook store.
It's a bit of it. Very well.
Yeah, probably also.
I just wanted to mention that Aspen, upstairs, across, over there somewhere, they actually feature the Entourage Edge, and they've got 4 books available now, and 2 are, big shocker, Erwin Chemerinsky, Crim Procedure and Con Law, and then they've got a Just Writing book from Ann Inquist, and a Practical Guide to Appellate Advocacy from Mary Beth Beasley. So 4 books.
It'd be interesting if that practical guide has video clips.
Their Sloan book, basically, research is also in ebook form.
It's coming, but it doesn't mean that they're necessarily done well.
All of those up.
Well, at this point, I think when we talk about ebook there are different formats. What David said, when we think about ebook, used to be just PDF. Right? That's the ebook we're thinking about. But with all those portable devices coming along, PDF doesn't really work that well. So that's why we have different formats right now. And Alma, you said you want to do something about what CALI plan to do. Can you've also done something with epub. So.
Right. I mean, we've looked at. I mean, one of the things that happens with one of the key things about like any of these electronic readers is that they don't know what a page is. Okay. So that means that all the text in a document, in a book or whatever it is, has to flow seamlessly from beginning to end in order to really get a good display on any of these readers, or else it's just a PDF. I mean, a PDF is literally a picture of a page. And there are limitations when you start moving around PDFs in, and I know they're making PDFs flowable and stuff, but still, generally speaking, a lot of it doesn't flow that well. But because what happens is that when you think about case books and when you think about court opinions and when you think about journal articles, what do they all have? And
Citation needs.
footnotes, footnotes, right? And those footnotes are literally tied to the pages. If you take away the pages, then and you reflow the text to make it look nice on the Kindle, for example, the Kindle will deal with footnotes. It just makes them endnotes, right? But what that does is that disrupts how we think about all of these sorts of things, right? So, as we've been looking at formats, one of the things that becomes real apparent with all that is that the first thing that you need to do is get rid of footnotes. I mean, make them all endnotes, and so that the structure changes, and so that you've got all the text of the actual resource and all the notes at the end. And plenty of disciplines do that, by the way. I mean, it's not like a new and radical idea. Matter of fact, I think all other disciplines do that, but I don't, so.
Well, they don't usually write the text mostly in the footnotes either.
That's true, they also don't do that, right. So, right, the art of the footnote is probably, that's another session.
If you're dealing with an e-reader, the capability is there to have the links built in if they do it right, so it really shouldn't matter from a conceptual point of view, whether it's a footnote or an endnote. If you want to link it, I mean, if you want to read it, you're going to click the link, and
it pops
in
up.
an ideal world,
Touch the link, not
it would
click.
either take up the full page, or you would have the choice of splitting the page between the main text and the note.
And the note, right, yes, that's true. And, but the thing is that what we see is the ability to make that conceptual jump. If I don't see the footnote at the bottom of my page, it doesn't exist. It's like an existential thing, right? Because yes, I mean, those notes there's plenty of ways to display them, and there's plenty of ways to handle the links, and the e-readers do that well. What they don't do so well is reproduce the pages we're used to seeing. And so when we're dealing with things like looking at the possibility of reformatting like lots of court opinions into e-reader formats, or our E-Langdell project, which is looking at doing open source casebooks and course materials. We want that. We want that text to always be thought of as going into that electronic format. At least I do. And so as a result, we're actually like looking at tools that work with that. And it actually turns out to not be that difficult to do. Right? I mean, if you've got something in Word, or if you're creating something in Word, you just use endnotes instead of footnotes. And you save it in a basic, like as an RTF document, and that handles those endnotes perfectly well, and it sort of all hangs together. And then there's a tool out there that I like a lot called Calibra, which is an eBook management library management software that also has a lot of conversion tools in it. And so, and given its functionality, I can feed it a well-formed file of several different formats, and click a button and convert it into something that's readable in iBooks, on the Kindle, on just about any reader, and I can even output PDF. All from that single source, and that's really the sort of thing that we're looking at working on. So
assuming you have the rights to do that.
Assuming that right. Well, we're talking about stuff that, I mean, we're looking at stuff that's either in in the public domain, right, court opinions, or stuff that's that we're creating, essentially.
Does Calibra or some of these other tools do they know to strip out any of the metadata that might have been in the Word version of a file? Or might it be somewhere buried in the code of the mobile pocket reader file or wherever it generates?
I'm not exactly sure.
Wouldn't that be nice? You have all your edits somehow in there to be pulled back out again? That's it. Don't want to think about it. Forget it.
I want to get to your
Oh,
question later.
I'm sorry, but
Okay, go
before
ahead.
I have a public service announcement I promised to make. Someone named Elizabeth Farrell, who's an attendee at the conference, says, she said on Twitter, if anyone finds an iPhone in a black and yellow OtterBox case, it's hers, please come find her and return it. She's very, very sad missing it. So I promised her I would announce it. So if anybody finds it, it's Elizabeth Farrell, or you can tell me about it.
Okay,
Sorry.
we'll answer your question. But the Calibra, it doesn't really convert the Word document that very well.
Yeah, you kind of have to. Yeah, you have to use like either RTF or convert it to
Right.
HTML.
So when you convert to RTF, then all the matter will be out. Most
Good.
But back to his question.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess my thought is you guys are talking about some of the difficulties associated with using e-readers in the classroom. I think one of the first difficulties would be that not everybody has one, but everybody does have a laptop. it seems. And I can still put all of my PDFs of court opinions up on a Blackboard site, and my students can read those during class and read those away from the class. So I'm wondering, and I love e-readers, so I guess what I'm wondering is there a particular utility that e-readers are going to bring to the classroom? I mean, rather than us doing handstands to try to fit existing things into e-readers, why do we care? Is there an extra utility that's going to be brought to the classroom from e-readers? Or is the laptop, do they have any additional functionality over a laptop?
Jonathan, you want to talk about e-readers?
You know, this is my e-reader, as long as my eyes hold out. You know, weight, battery life, older buildings, like some of these, not having to find power, not having the other distractions of a laptop. You look at what they're giving kids with assistive technology, and I happen to have one in the lower grades. They're not giving them laptops, A, because they're heavy, but B, because they've got solitaire and everything else. I mean, think of what we have to go through to lock down laptops with all those people in the lobby there for exams. So one advantage a dedicated e-reader device might have is focus, battery life, but also if you have the resources and your students have the resources, or the prices come down low enough to hand out dedicated devices, it may be that there are dedicated applications that are developed for those devices, clickers, all those other things that we're also talking about in the classroom, that can be more easily implemented in knowing that everyone has the same device, rather than assuming that it will run on every possible platform that your students might be bringing in.
I think it's also a bit of a false dichotomy you're setting up. It's not e-readers or laptops necessarily. I mean, you can get Kindle on your laptop. I mean, it isn't necessarily an either or thing. This device attempts to be both itself. And anyone with a netbook has an e-reader, anyone with a phone has an e-reader. It's not so much that there's a competition going on. But you could have your laptop sitting there in a big pile of books, or you can have your laptop with a nice library installed on it, or one of these, or a Kindle DX, or whatever is the latest and greatest thing. And I think there is a measurable convenience to that. I don't know, I'm a big guy, never had a hard time carrying around a big pile of books, but it seems to me a lot of people don't like doing that. And a lot of people like to be able to take their books everywhere they go. And their laptop, or their iPhone, or their iPad is the only thing they take with them everywhere they go. And if they're sitting in the line somewhere, or they're waiting in the dentist office, or whatever, they could be studying, and they couldn't be studying if they had to carry a con law book with them everywhere they went. So it provides, it doesn't have to be that there's this choice of which is better, or is it worth it to bring it to the table. It's more like this is a whole extra thing you can do, and a whole extra way of managing it. And a lot of ways that you guys are talking about, because some of you are content providers, you know, most students aren't content providers, they're content consumers, and they don't have the angle of knowing what they can get off the web or what they can't get off the web or whatever. They know what's provided for them. And eBooks, even with the DRM and stuff involved, is provided for them.
Can I just follow up? I apologize. My only follow-up is I understand the advantages of having all of my stuff electronically in one place rather than having a big stack of books. I guess what I'm asking is that because probably 100% of law students, 95%, already have laptops, right, and already have the ability to read PDFs that I can put up on the web for free, and they can read them for free. You know, what then, and I heard some of the comments that you made, but you know, what then is the particular utility that e-readers themselves?
That's not a textbook. That's the utility I'm saying.
Yeah.
You can provide a PDF because you're publishing your content. The student doesn't think about that. The student thinks about, I have a textbook I have to get for my class. And so the advantage that they have has nothing to do with whether or not you can publish something on their behalf, or Elmer can put up something or whatever on the web. The point is they need to get their textbook. They walk into school the first day, they have a choice. They have textbook physical, textbook digital. They have an option and an availability to do that. It has nothing to do with, all the 13 other things you want to provide for your class, which you may be able to do in any format you want. The content, the people who own and publish that content are not going to want to give it away any which way a student or a professor wants. They have textbooks. They understand textbooks. The publishers understand that model of getting revenue and paying the people who authored those things to provide them. And this is a conduit that is understandable to the industry, even though they're kind of slow on the uptake on it.
We also have commuting students, and many schools do. And there's not all trains, you don't always have room even to open a laptop, particularly if you're taking a commuter train or a crowded bus. But assuming you're not going to get mugged for the device, if we have a student who's taking an hour train ride and wants to do his or her reading, being able to say, whether it's mandatory or optional, it's available for you on your choice of small, thin, good battery life electronic devices is an immediate benefit to those students.
We have this lovely thing called the Pacific Ocean right outside of our campus. They tend to like to go to the beach. And, e-ink works really well in full sunlight. So
Let's get to,
I just wanted to mention for people who haven't played around with this too much, understand that Adobe is completely behind EPUB. And if you have InDesign, you can create EPUB and PDF at the same time. And also, if you create EPUB format files, you can read those on at least a Windows box or a Mac using Adobe Digital Editions. I know that everybody up there knows this. I'm just saying that maybe other people may not.
This is one of the things I think that, there are professors, I don't know in your institutions, the professors who are already in the habit of publishing their publications in various formats. We have a professor who published the newsletters in PDF, in Word, and in EPUB. So there are professors already doing it. So we're in the education, in the technology field, it's better for us to know something about it. In terms of format, Alma talking about, the eBook format. When the e-reader, if ever it would develop to a point like an iPad in a sense like this big, maybe you can also annotate. Then we wouldn't probably not talking about all this reflowable text anymore if it get to this point. But at this point, they're not. So that's why I think that the people are talking about the tablets where you can do annotate. But I think insofar in law school, I think that, David, you're the only one that in law school who are really think about how to use the tablet.
We're trying. I mean, that's the experiment.
So maybe it's, does anybody want to listen more about what's the impetus or how to implement?
At our school, we just got a Kindle in the library. I'm a library technologist, and I work a lot with faculty on specific projects. So we got our Kindle, and we weren't exactly sure what we were going to do because we don't want to rebuy materials and have it stuck on one device. But we went and talked to a faculty member, and he said, oh, well, here's how I got around the subscription tool. So here's a bunch of links, and here's how to get RSS feeds and delivery and stuff like this, and here's how I back up all my annotations. And I'm watching him work, and I said, wouldn't it be nice if somehow the library could do document delivery to you when you say, I want to get a copy of this, instead of sending you a PDF, we're able to deliver an ebook directly to your device. So that's not talking about students, we probably would not do that for them, but the fact that he can annotate and he can see that on any device where he has his Kindle account, and the fact that he can go into his Kindle account and email all of those annotations to himself or export it to Word. He said, I would use that so much for my research. It would just simplify my life so much. Because, I mean, that's one feature, the annotations that you can take with you. So, that.
Dave, would you mind mentioning what we were going to do for the Star with the Kindle? Remember that?
I don't remember.
We bought the Kindle DX for Dean Starr. He travels a lot, and he's got 3-5 people tracking down paper for him all the time. They convert it to PDF, and then they fax it to the hotel room. And so he may have 100 pages, 200 pages of stuff. And he's very tactile, and he likes to look at his paper and scribble on it. But we thought, well, hey, maybe we could just add another feature, send him off with a Kindle DX, and at least we know we can get something to him fast, rather than having his assistant chase down the concierge to figure out where the fax is coming in. We never actually got that done. He's now president of Baylor University.
He escaped.
You know,
He has our Kindle.
there are other ways of doing similar things. I know I just set up actually my mother's iPad, and I wanted to be able to send her stuff. And there's a Dropbox client for iPad. Dropbox, I mean, it's not, it has a free version, but it's essentially a public file depository. And one can dump things into a Dropbox folder, a public Dropbox folder. And then on the iPad, I forget which of the document readers has this.
Yeah, Dropbox has this built in, and also you can do there's a called just PDF, and just reads beautifully.
Right, and so it's not emailed. You know, you could do different documents, different formats, and it can be opened. So it's not just the Kindle. The Kindle, it's great for doing that. But for people who may want to play with iPads as one example, or other devices, thinking about delivery systems like Dropbox, where there are clients for just about everything, is another one of those out of the, you'll pardon the expression, box ways of looking at it. The only thing I want to add, I've used specifically eBooks twice. Once, I assigned The Hacker Crackdown, Bruce Sterling's book, and it's available for free. It's available for paper too, but I say to my students, look, I think probably more of them will take me up on it now than they did 2 or 3 years ago. Don't bother buying this or trying to find it in your local library. It's legally available for free. Here's all the different ways you can do it. Go get it and read it, and then we can discuss it. And the other book, I wrote a book about 11 years ago, and it's no longer in print. I barely have a few copies. But there are bits of it that I find useful, chapters. Having taken back the ebook rights from the publisher, I distribute it myself to my students. And, you know, that's another really, it used to be that the professor, the faculty member who was working on his or her next book, right, made his or her students unwitting proofreaders of the draft as case materials. But it's very wasteful. And sometimes, you know, and then you run into the copying issues in paper and student printing. But if you've got faculty members who are doing drafts too, they can do it that way.
I want to, I know I'm on the panel, but I kind of want to like ask, sort of propose a thought here. And this is probably just a dumb IT guy thing, you know, and how though I've worked at a law school for 10 years, I still don't kind of get it or something. But maybe there's a facility here also for a professor. I don't know. Sounds like someone could sit down and write a textbook and publish it, e-publish it through Amazon, and make more money than the publishers are going to pay them for, and provide it to students at a cost less than that they would have to pay for a published book. I mean, maybe there's a whole, why isn't there?
Does it count for tenure?
Well,
that's, ask the question. Does an ebook count towards tenure?
Maybe there's a way of making it count for tenure, but I have no, that's not, the process of that thing is a bureaucratic and cultural and important issue. But there's no technical barrier in the way of every professor who wants to write their own textbook, being able to write their own textbook, have some system in place where it's peer-reviewed and things and such of appropriate validity, and it's published, and it's e-published conveniently with no fuss, no muss, no problems, in a familiar form. It's still a textbook. It's still useful in terms of what people are used to in delivering education in the classroom like we're used to, but it completely circumvents the previously enormous difficulty of publishing a physical book and having a whole industry involved in doing so. Or is that, am I being too...
You actually just described most of the CALI E-Langdell project. So, right, and you know, except that we're actually... Well,
so I'm no more naive than you are.
Right. Well, no, we're actually paying the faculty up front for writing chapters. Well, not up front, but for you know, the faculty get paid for writing chapters, and then that material comes back to us. And then we're going to make it available electronically for free, and probably through some sort of print-on-demand thing at, a reasonable cost, because those things are relatively, well, certainly not $100, but, so we're, looking at that.
Let's get John's.
Most state schools, or a lot of state schools, faculty can't make money off their own books. There's a conflict, or considered conflict. And that thought is even true, though not enforced as much in private schools, where if the professor is selling books to his own students, then he's, making a profit at it. Which, by the way, happened to me a lot in undergrad. It was very common, go buy 500 pages of photocopied professor's textbook.
Or friend X professor and friend Y at other institution buy each other's books. That
brother-in-law.
Of course, that sort of thing's going to happen.
Okay, Ken, do you have a question?
Well, I have a comment. I'm going to offer two assumptions. You can take them as true or not. Assumption A is a big factor here is whether you use the horse and cart analogy or the chicken and egg analogy, you still have a content/customer device issue. How do you sell the things without the content? How do you develop the content unless the content providers see the audience? The second assumption is probably most of us agree would be at least worthwhile, if not a net positive, to go down this road at least further than we've gone so far. So then the question that arises from that is, what can we, the people in this room, do to push in that direction, to push reality that way?
Until someone actually puts forth the labor, it's not going to happen.
It's already happening, right?
It has to be
I have
labor.
a case, they had the experiment with the science books that proved to be fairly successful. The problem is the problem that I've seen in a couple of the sessions here. We're in a silo of our own domain, and we don't realize these challenges are somewhat global in academics and are already being answered. It's easily solved, the problem with the way we design casebooks. Somebody asked the other question about, well, what would be the value add beyond a PDF? And that's context. Because if you're studying Brown versus Board of Education and you were born in 1985, you have no idea what life was like, even in Cleveland, Ohio, or in Cincinnati, or anywhere, what it looked like, what the world looked like. And you could provide context to these cases with historical information. With that, let's not talk about how you access that and copyright and all that, but you can provide context that makes it alive in a way that no casebook ever did.
I suspect that most of the pushback, I think you're right, that these issues are coming up. And as someone who has self-published any booklet, it wasn't long enough to be a book. If anyone wants, I'm not going to pitch it now, we can talk to me later. It's free. And in thinking about that, but I think there are probably a few cultural things in the legal academic world working against that very logical notion. The first being, and I wasn't really just sort of speaking in a silly way, does it count?
Right.
And it's not just ebooks. The question of what is writing from if you look at some of the better legal blogs, legal academic blogs out there, they are as accurate, better read. Who's reading law review articles? Honestly?
Yes.
Well, if we have librarians in the room, you guys may be. But, your typical blog, though, Eric Goldman, technology law blogging, he's right up there. He's, I'm sure, producing at least as many words as that's tenure track faculty member puts into a law review. And they're probably read more. But do they count? I don't know about his particular situation. A lot of those sorts of things is a self-published, though still scholarly, ebook counted in whatever ephemeral way as much as a book that West or Aspen or any of the other publishers picks up. So that's one thing. The other is, think about that duopoly or whatever you want, the casebook publishers and the influence that I think they have in legal academia. I'm sure that's a pretty big establishment to go against culturally. That, and then there's this issue of, are you, it's unseemly. Just like it was unseemly for lawyers to advertise. I think to a certain extent it's unseemly for full-time faculty members to be selling things themselves. The advantage of a publisher is that it has sales reps who visit every law school office twice a year, right? And so the faculty member may not be making much money, but he or she doesn't have to go sell it either. And I think that those cultural factors have a lot to do with the inertia.
As long as I'm sticking my foot in it, I might as well stick it in a little farther and say, you were talking about that silo that we're kind of in. We better beware of that silo. Because if there is, in academia, in the wider world, these things are being dealt with and solutions are being generated, and if the law school isn't part of that, we're going to be stuck with whatever they do. I mean, we see this time and time again with other technology, where if the law school doesn't participate and if it doesn't include itself, and in fact sometimes the law school at Pepperdine, we try to be the people out in front of things if we can, because if we don't, the main university will make decisions that will change our lives radically. And if the academic community makes decisions that on the basis that many might find unseemly, or we have these issues endemic to the legal community, it may just like sweep right along, and then we're left out. We're left out of the ability to participate in the way the industry decides how to do this.
That's a perfect point. We got about 3 or 4 minutes. I just want to put one final question to the panel members. What's the prediction in terms of the devices? Which devices will come out? And in terms of eBook, what's the prediction in a law school settings? We'll start with Elmer.
Let's start with me. Well, I don't know. I mean, until you've got, I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen anything yet. I haven't really taken a look at the Edge a lot. I mean, I know what its capabilities are, but I haven't done anything with it. But I haven't seen anything yet that looks like it's going to be the thing that we're going to use. I mean, there's going to be a bunch of devices that come out in the next year to 18 months that'll do, because we haven't really heard from the Windows world yet. I was going to bring my Windows tablet PC, but it's hot and it's heavy and it's loud, and so it's really useless. So because those are the 3 things you want in like an eBook reader, right? You want it to be hot and heavy and loud. So so we don't know what Windows is going to do. We don't know where some of the other device manufacturers are going to come out. We haven't seen what Google's going to do yet. I mean, Google has a ton of content.
Don't forget HP and Palm.
Right, HP and Palm, that's right. I mean, so we're just at the very beginning of this. So I think that the next 18 months we'll see more devices, and then we're going to see more content moving there. And then I think that this conference 2 years from now will probably look a lot different, because I'll bet that just about everybody's carrying around some device or another, and that the conference materials will be available in a number of ebook formats instead of those printed PDFs.
You can already do that now.
Yeah, you could do that.
Well, setting aside my particular love for HP and Palm, if I wanted to say device, it will be probably a tablet running some sort of tablet-specific operating system, not just Windows ported over, or for that matter, I'm not sure about iOS, but tablet operating system with a Bluetooth keyboard that you can do real editing on, and over time, those will supplant laptops for our students. You're not going to buy both, but I would much rather carry around 2.5, 3 pounds of super ability editing machine that folds flat than a laptop. So that's where I think, and I'm not sure it's going to matter which device. I think that content's going to be, you're not going to be locked into any one device for that. Where I would think it's going academically is, just as we've had to do so many other places, faculty has to be taught to review their syllabi and know what they can do now and think creatively what we can do, now think creatively about how to use these new resources.
Could do. We just got 30 seconds.
And the recording show.
Director of our law library, Katie Kerr, has her magnificent full-blown workstation. She has her Starship, and then she has her shuttle. She has her iPad, and she loves it and takes it everywhere with her, everywhere she goes, everywhere she needs to go. She's already doing, with no particular prompting from anybody else, all on her own, what maybe everyone's doing, 2 years from now. But you're right. If you saw Google I/O and you saw Android 2.2 and what they're talking about, Google's talking about doing there, you're talking about some pretty significant shuttles. And what Apple's doing, you're talking about some pretty significant shuttles that really reduce the need for laptop power. You just need to be able to get on the web and edit things and do the kinds of things we all knew that computers really need to be powered for in the first place. And then a home station somewhere where you had your real power if you needed it for other things.
Thank you very much for participating. Well, good job. Thanks very much. Thanks very much.
I gotta go find out what happened with the Twitter stream.
Oh, yeah. Well, now there's a confusion. CALI-con or CALI-con 10?
No, apparently CALI-con 10 was, Twitter showed too many tweets coming out of this IP address and rate limited us. That just came up.
So it must be coming off of.
But how? Wireless, wireless.
There's like 9.
The moderation was much more than moderate.
Thank you. Great. I was very excited.
I wanted to let you know so maybe you can see what it actually was. But
Well, it must all be coming through that.
That's
the firewall, yeah.
I'm hoping for a spectacular, very informative failure. Sounds like you're having fun.
And,
InDesign 4 or 5.
yeah, I'm a big believer in appropriate, valuable use of that.
Yes, cool. It's
I got a question for you.
making your own.
Given the culture, how much of
But that's an expensive. That's an expensive proposal, though. That's $6.99. But it's much better to go Elmer's route, which is get them into a format which
what I was put through when I was trying to Tenure
to convert it into.
And so I'm on the Tenure committee. I'm the next generation to this, even if it doesn't make any sense. Even if there may be a better peer review.
Not $6.99.
Peer review system, it's like, I mean, maybe we put something in place that's better than what we got, or better than what we got.
Short answer to that is,
The thing with doing with Calibra is that you've got to place sometimes resource stuff really likes really nice format.
go through that level.
Oh, okay, all right.
But
So
they
if you do a
impose
Word document
what they
without
think
like a fancy font,
the next generation, it's a lot harder to become partners than the partners had to go through.
So you're thinking that there's like a level of
when you do an export
of sort of shortcutting the management process. They're trying to use this as a way, because they need ways to manage things, and they don't know how to manage
I'm
them.
sure they're thinking that,
out
I think some of it is
PDF or
some of it is, they don't, they don't see them as equivalent in any way.
Right. Well, one of the things
They're
you
probably
can do,
the people who do read large.
there's a way like if you know
I
what
happen
stuff
to
like
personally be in this odd situation because my job is this weird hybrid of administrator and teacher, and so I'm doing a lot of non-typical stuff and trying to find a way of making that count.
And that's fine, because what you really want to do is you want to be able to.
Well, you have to convince people of that.
Oh,
So on top of actually doing the work, you have to convince people of the validity of the work.
And you want to be able to say,
But see, that's what I'm saying. I think there's
without
a kind
having
of
to like
a,
hand make every one, and because the
think
hand
that
making every
sometimes
one
the
is
boss
just
shows
it's a
up
drag. It can't.
and wants to fuss around what you're doing because they can justify their own, and I don't mean this in a negative way, they need to justify their management of you.
There's no badge.
They have to
I don't
show
see
that
a
they're
badge.
contributing
Oh, yeah, you can't badge.
the
You
direction,
can't badge.
the
Yeah.
labor that's
Put
been
in the
brought
queue.
in.
Right, you can put it in the
Probably
queue.
our labor.
Right.
Yeah,
But the labor
Calibra stuff
has been brought in is being
basically allow you
tasked properly
like what
and
you
being
do is you
managed
tell it,
properly for the institutional
you
goals.
can either target it at
They may or may not have the skill set to do that effectively,
or a specific
but they pick up, even
So like if I want to do is
they
like,
pick up
okay,
an
we
easy
know
tool
that
once in a
this is only
while.
good